What's up, board? Yeah. Real. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm an Apple Watch.
I'm not really. Real. Yeah. No.
Yeah, I was gonna say, it doesn't look like this one just kind of sits.
Yeah. Morning.
Congratulations. I haven't seen you, so I wanted to say that.
Thank you very much. What are they, guys?
Yeah.
Big crowd.
I don't think that she. I have one. But I don't know that they're trying to stand out. Did you? Anybody else? Yeah, they're just.
The guys who got by my house, I got new bottles of water. I said, you guys will all of this. Thank you, we really appreciate it, so. Good job. No, that's right. That's actually a story about East Meadow.
So that's right.
I thought you're just getting sure.
Yeah, sure. I didn't know, he said, oh, because we have.
Yes.
That's the other city.
Yeah, it's a lot.
There you go.
Well, how she there. Yep.
So she was talking to Max. She had a couple things she caught it before they had it. I said, you know, that's not right. She told me they didn't. I was like, okay, I gotta go leave that for next week.
Here's what I hear here. I think I agree.
Yes.
Reading that. You're the word. Because of the social pressure. Can you hear me okay? Can you hear me? Go ahead and start.
Yep.
Good morning, I'm Les Bergam, I'm city attorney for the city of Frankfurt. With me today are several councilmen with the city. We've got, I think, Clarence Wortham over here, Steve Beardsley, Joe Palmer is here. We have from the utility service board, Todd Corey, and Kent Brewer is here. Todd is the utility superintendent. Police department, we have represented by Scott Shoemaker and Jim Skinner, I think I saw here. Don Stock is here for Frankfurt Building Services, and John Kirby for the Frankfurt Fire Department. Jason Forsythe is here for the street department. If anyone has any questions about streets or roads. And then we have Nick Kyle, who's with Barnes and Thornburg, and Lauren Fox, who's with Barnes and Thornburg, who are helping us through this annexation process. So this is the second of 6 informational outreach meetings that the city plans to conduct. To provide information and to answer questions and address concerns that the public might have with regard to this proposed annexation. Most of you should be aware that for the past several years, if not decades, the city and the county have, as an economic development project, looked toward the possibility of developing the interchange out to the west of Frankfurt at State Road 28 and Interstate 65. That's been in the process for quite a while now, and then last year, an interlocal agreement was entered into between the city and the county to go ahead and extend utility services out there to the interchange in the form of water and sewage. And I think you all know that that project is underway at this time. Along with the development that is hoped for to increase the tax base for our entire community and to provide for its benefit and welfare, additional services will need to be provided. Those would be in the form of fire protection, police service, trash pickup, continuing service and maintenance of the utilities that we've discussed in the form of water and sewage, all of which are quite expensive, all of which would, we think, be to the benefit of the owners in that area and to the property values as the area is developed. We had at the first meeting some large maps of the proposed annexation territory. We weren't able to get those over here this morning, but we do have available for your convenience copies of those maps of the proposed territory here on the table by the door. That geographical area is proposed at this time. It can be modified. It can be reduced to some extent as may be needed to accommodate different needs and requirements. It cannot be increased. So we're pleased that you've all attended this morning. I will turn the meeting over, I think, at this time to Mayor Sheets. And Judy, if you'll come up, and then we'll turn the meeting over to probably Nick, who will address, or Lauren, who will address the overview of the annexation process. Judy.
First of all, I just want to welcome everyone here today. This is, like Les said, the second of 6 informational meetings. This is for us to provide information for you. We have legal counsel here, or financial consultants, but we're listening to you as well. We want to know your comments. We want to know your concerns. That's what this is about. We're all going to work together to make this happen. The county and the city's worked on this for several years now. I just came into office in March, so I'm just learning a lot of this along with some of you as well. But we're working really hard to make this, but it's going to work for all of us. We have department heads here. We have council members, of course, the legal counsel, financial consultants, and feel free to talk with them after this meeting today. We're here to listen to you as well. You did forget Bart back there. Bart's with our Parks Department, so don't forget him if you have any questions. But like I said, again, I just welcome you for being here, and anything that you need, any questions, any concerns, we're here for you. And Lauren, I'm going to turn this over to Lauren Fox. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mayor, and thank you for being here this morning. My name is Lauren Box, as Les indicated. I'm an attorney at Barnes and Thornburg, and I'm here with my colleague Nick Kyle. And together we're going to be providing an overview of the annexation process and also obviously here to answer any questions you might have about that process. So before I start, I do want to talk about some recent changes to the annexation statute, and I'll talk about those throughout this process. But one really good change that we think that came out of those changes is this outreach program. So as the mayor and Les indicated, this is the second of 6 meetings, and previously under the statute, the first time impacted landowners would have even learned about the annexation was through a notice that they received of the public hearing. So they received a large packet of information, they received a notice, but that was really the first time that they were made aware of the process. So now, under the new statute, we have the opportunity to conduct this outreach program. And what this program is for is for us to tell you what the city is proposing to do, and then to hear any questions, any concerns, any information you would want to share, and then to be able to refine the plan moving forward. So we really think this is a good change, and it allows us an opportunity to collaborate with you and then ultimately refine what the city might do with this annexation. So I do want to make one point, and I think Les said this as well. The city has not yet taken any final action. So ultimately what that means is we have not drafted an annexation ordinance. We haven't introduced one. We're really trying to go through this process with you, hear any concerns, and then we'll use that information and incorporate it into a final annexation ordinance when that's introduced. So why are we even here this morning? Why is the city even going through this process of annexation? I think the simple answer to that is that the city, in conjunction with the county, wants to be in a position to take advantage of economic development out at I-65. So I think under the statute, there is a requirement for contiguity. And what that means is, in order for the city to be able to take part in that economic development, its borders actually have to physically touch the property that it wants to annex. So what the city is doing with this annexation is ultimately to position itself in the future to be able to take advantage of that economic development that takes place out at I-65. So I did talk a little bit about some of those changes in the statute, and in the past, we would have been able to just do a purely right-of-way annexation, where we would have only annexed the right-of-way, and there would not have been any properties included in that annexation. So unfortunately, under the new statute, we cannot do that, and we do have to annex property along one side of that right-of-way, which is why you'll see the annexation map and the territory that does include those properties. So I think one important thing to note is through this process, we're really trying to have as minimal of an impact as possible. So we already heard some comments on Tuesday night. We'll hopefully hear some comments today, and we've incorporated that, and we'll continue to incorporate those in order to have as minimal of an impact as possible. So I do want to clear up one thing, because I think this is a concern that we heard leading into these meetings, and also it was a concern that we heard on Tuesday night, and that is, how is agricultural property impacted under the annexation? So if your property is assessed agricultural, it will remain assessed that way. It does not matter if it's sold, doesn't matter if it's inherited, if it's passed on. It will continue to be assessed agricultural until a time when you, as the property owner, you could consent to change the zoning, but only if you make that decision will that ultimately change. So I think, and I don't know if very many of you actually got the packets, but in the packet there is an Indiana code site that explicitly says that. So only you as the property owner can make that decision, and that will be explicitly stated in the annexation ordinance when it's introduced. But we wanted to make sure to clear that up today as well. So I think before I get into the process, I want to mention one more thing, just in this spirit of trying to have as minimal impact as possible. There is going to be a 3-year delay on the annexation. So let's say that the annexation ordinance is final in spring of 2021. That means that the ordinance would not actually take effect until spring of 2024. The first property tax assessment wouldn't take place until spring of 2025. And then the actual tax payment would not be made until May of 2026. So it's going to be about 6 years before there really is any impact tax-wise on the property. And I should have noted this as well, but agricultural property is exempt from the municipal tax rate. So as long as your property is assessed agricultural and it continues to be used in that way, there will not be a tax impact on you. So quickly, just to talk about what the process looks like. As we said, we're going through these 6 outreach program meetings. And once these meetings are done and we have all of the information we need, the council will introduce an annexation ordinance, and that will ultimately have the final map of the territory. And with that, there will also be a fiscal plan that will be adopted. And that's a document that will ultimately state how services are going to be extended, what services are going to be extended, and how those will be paid for. So once the ordinance is introduced, the next step in the process will be, there will be a notice that will go out to all landowners in the annexation territory. And that notice will ultimately notify you of the public hearing that the council is going to hold. It will also include maps and kind of summaries. We'll have a lot of information about the proposed annexation, but it will give you a notice that you can go and attend a public hearing and ultimately comment on the annexation if you choose to do so at that time. So as you guessed it, the council will then hold a public hearing on the proposed annexation, and then 1 to 2 months after that public hearing is held, they will then vote to adopt the annexation ordinance. So upon adoption, there is a what we call a remonstrance period. So if 65% of landowners sign a remonstrance petition, then the annexation is done. It will not move forward. If that number is 51%, then ultimately the annexation will go to a court hearing. So that's kind of a review of the fiscal plan, if you will, and then it will be decided after that. If no remonstrance is filed, what ultimately happens is the annexation ordinance will be final upon the ending of that remonstrance period. So I think that was most of my remarks, and I'm happy to take questions at this time, or I can also hand it over to Jerry Hickman, who can talk more about the financial aspect. Yes?
After the 3-year delay period,
Mm-hmm.
is it automatic that that will take place, or could it potentially be delayed again for another period of time?
So it will only be a 3-year delay. That's the maximum under the statute, and Nick obviously jump in. I know there are discussions about a further kind of rolling in of the tax process. So that doesn't mean May 2026 that you're necessarily going to pay 100% of the tax rate. That could also be ultimately phased in. So it could be longer than the 3-year period.
My concern is with the country facing unprecedented debt, deficit, state massive revenue shortfall, businesses, particularly travel, motel, hotel, restaurant, taking huge hits. I don't think anybody can tell what shape the economy is going to be in the next 2 or 3 years. So if things go dark, and they could, most certainly could, or is Frankfurt going to be stuck anyway, following through with that?
Well, and I think that's part of the reason why we've made the decision to delay the effective date of the annexation. I mean, otherwise this would potentially take effect in spring of 2021, which, given the uncertainty and that our goal to have as minimal impact as possible, we just didn't think that was going to be the best decision. So again, by including the 3-year delay and making that first tax bill not due until May of 2026, we are hoping that that's going to give us enough time to assess the impact. The economy will hopefully get back on track at that point, and it will have a minimal impact by making that decision.
That'll be my hope too. Thank you.
Yes.
Clinton County Commissioner Josh Ewens. I just want to make sure, as a point of clarity, you mentioned earlier that the city and county are working together on this annexation, and that's not the case. I want to make that crystal clear.
Well,
That's something that the city has decided to do. We have a loose partnership with the city as in the form of an interlocal agreement for going to run the utility infrastructure that we're expanding, but I want to make sure we don't mischaracterize this as something that the county has signed off on.
And I think what was said, Josh, is that the county and the city have for quite some time now been looking at the development of that interchange for economic development purposes. I don't think we said that we're working together on the annexation.
I'm pretty sure that's what she said last day.
I think what I was trying to articulate, and if I misspoke, I apologize. It has been our goal, and from talking to the mayor, I believe we've been in conversations with the county, tried to inform the county of our plans. Obviously, we have this interlocal agreement in place, so I guess I don't know all of the history and all of the conversations that have taken place, but my understanding is we are trying to work with you, and apparently you might have a different opinion of that.
No, I think you've got it partially correct, but I don't think you've got the whole story.
Were the county officials invited to be part of this presentation?
Well, this is an annexation that the city is doing. The county is not annexing this property, so ultimately, this outreach program is for the city officials to provide information about the annexation. So ultimately, the county wouldn't have been included because they're not the ones annexing the property.
So to his point, if they were really in on it, they probably would have been.
Well, again, my understanding from talking to city officials and just kind of my knowledge of the process is we have been notifying the county of the plans, and they have been at least aware and included in those conversations. Now, I don't know the extent of those conversations, but they have been involved in the discussions. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
I'm kind of reading directly from the Indiana statutes on municipality annexation. An Indiana municipality annexed property must satisfy one of two conditions established to ensure the land is urban in character. These two conditions are the area is at least 1/8 contiguous and density of the territory is at least 3 persons per acre. 50% territory is subdivided. Or, this is another option, the territory is owned commercial, industrial, or business. The territory is contiguous, except at least 1/4 rather than 1/8 of the boundary must coincide with municipal boundaries, and the land is needed and can be used by municipal development in a reasonable near future. That is a 4.7 mile long strip from the interstate to custom products. That would mean that the base depth of that would have to be a couple of miles. Satisfy that 1/8 of the total perimeter.
Well,
I don't know if the city attorney can look into this or not, but
we have, and actually, my colleague and I were talking about the 1/8 contiguous requirement this morning, and the map that we proposed, the annexation territory that we proposed does meet that requirement.
so it does not meet state statute.
No, it does.
No, I'm saying it does meet that requirement.
It's close to 20% contiguous.
Do we have a map of the properties that are supposed to be annexed and dimensions?
Yes, well, I don't know if the dimensions are on that map, but the map of the proposed territory as it stands now is on that back table, but something that Les indicated, and I would like to reiterate, is through this process, we're trying to receive as much information as possible, and, the map is not yet final. It is something that we continue to refine and something that could ultimately change, and ultimately that map will not be final until the annexation ordinance is introduced later on in this process.
I don't see where 1/8 of the area perimeter is satisfied. No better than I suppose. Have we looked at the cost involved in extending all of the fire and sewage and water and street lights and road maintenance and all this as well?
Yes, sir, we have, and I mentioned the fiscal plan, and this might be a good time for me to turn it over to Jerry Hickman from Reedy Financial. But the fiscal plan document that will be approved has all of that laid out, both how the services will be extended, what services will be extended, and the cost of those services and how they'll be paid. So if there's no more questions for me at the moment, I'll turn it over to Jerry and he
One
can,
more.
yeah, of course.
There's a small state-owned piece of property in there, I've been trying to buy it for 4 years. Will that be relented to the city of the state?
I'm
Or
not,
state property?
I don't know which property you're talking about.
That's between my little parcel and, custom products. It's a heady cul-de-sac down there that's right in front of custom products.
What's your question again?
Will it be relinquished to the municipality from the state, or will the state still maintain ownership?
The state owns it for what purpose?
Because it was self-made.
The ownership will not change of that parcel.
Okay, I'm gonna turn it over to Jerry.
Hi, I'm Jerry Hickman from Reed Financial Group. I've got Nikki Bell here as well with me. We're here to answer any questions that you guys may have as far as tax impacts go. We have calculated each property's projected tax bill post annexation. So for anybody that has any questions there, we'll stick around and we can go over that with you individually if you would like. Prior to that, I won't get into too much detail on this since we do have each property calculated. I don't know if everybody grabbed the 4 slides. Just quickly, to go over how to calculate a property tax bill. Essentially, it's the net assessed value times the tax rate. So in this scenario, which I'm sure most of you know, the city's tax rate would be included on your new tax bill on top of the county, the township, school, anything like that. You take the net assessed value times the tax rate divided by 100, that equals your new property tax bill. Along the way, there are certain adjustments that you have to make, which we'll get into that now. So on page 2, the first step, you go from gross AV to net AV. This is really homesteads. They're the ones that are going to get these set of deductions. Homestead deduction, mortgage deduction, supplemental, veteran, over 65 and blind. And then also there's certain exemptions. In this scenario, there would be an exemption for ag, which would be no impact for any ag. The next major factor on the 3rd page is circuit breaker. This was implemented it was phased in 2008/2009. Essentially, it's a cap on what taxpayers will pay on their tax bills. Depending on the type of property, you get different caps. Homes will get 1%, 2%, or 2% caps would be on residential, ag land, and then 3% would be businesses. On this next page, we'll actually show how that works. So what this last page is, we actually have an example of a $150,000 homestead. We picked a 1% property just so that we could show how the deductions would work as well. So $150,000 gross assessed value, you would get deductions of a homestead deduction, which is the lesser of $45,000 or 60% of your assessed value, gross assessed value. Then we factored in a mortgage deduction and then also a supplemental deduction as well in there to get to your net assessed value of $65,250. From there, we would take that times the taxing district rate, which would include county, school, township, city, all of those, divided by 100 to get to your gross tax bill. From there, we would get to the property tax relief. Now, not every county is going to have this. Clinton County does have this, and what the property tax relief is it factors in, from your income tax. It's a rate, so, if you're working, it's a portion that comes out of your, paycheck that's held into an account, and then it's a credit onto your, property tax bill. The credit here for this particular property would end up being $449, which would then get you your adjusted bill of $1,945. Then that's when you factor in the circuit breaker cap. And for this particular property, since it's 150,000, it's 1% of that, which is 1,500. So that's the most that you can pay. Since you've hit that cap, there's actually been a circuit breaker credit of $445. So long story short, this property would only, at least at the cap, and would only pay $1,500. Now, we've calculated this for each individual property, so like I said, we can stick around, and anybody that has any questions, we can definitely answer those. Or if there's any other questions about the individual taxable impact on other units, any questions that you may have. Any questions in particular on individual impacts or other units that may be affected at this time? Or any other questions in general, even outside of the financial side? Well, at this time, I feel like we'll stick around, and if you want to come up individually and ask us any questions, Les, do you have anything else? Okay.
We had a couple of questions come in to the city that I can read to you folks, along with the answers that have been returned, if you think that might be helpful. One of the questions was, will they be running water and sewer lines down our road? And the answer to that is the territory being considered consists largely of State Road 28 right away to its interchange with I-65, as well as property lying north of the right of way and south of the former railroad right of way. The city has already, in the county, has already extended water and sewer service to the Jefferson area. We are also extending in conjunction with the county water and sewer service along State Road 28 to Interstate 65. If your property fronts State Road 28, you will be able to connect to that extension. The development of property at the interchange will likely require another extension from that main, which the developer will pay for, consistent with the city's policies. Second question we received by email was, what is the timeline for annexation? I think Lauren has covered that. We are proposing a 3-year delay in the effective date, which means that the impact of the taxes will not occur until the year 2026. The third question submitted was, how will my property be impacted? If you live in the annexation territory, you will be permitted to vote. We haven't talked about voting in municipal elections after the effective date. There will be no change in zoning as a result of annexation, and you will be permitted to continue using your property as you currently are. To the extent your property is classified as agricultural for assessment purposes, there will be no additional property taxes. That's by state statute. To the extent your property is classified as something other than agricultural, such as residential or commercial, the city can provide you estimated property tax impact if you just relate to us who you are, and that's why Jerry and Mike really are here today. So those are a couple of the questions that we've received by email. As Lauren has indicated, the city has not yet taken any official action on this annexation other than to propose this territory in order to accomplish the hopeful future development of that interchange for the benefit of our community. No official action, as Lauren indicated, will be taken until a fiscal plan in written form has been submitted. that's a little bit down the road. If you have further questions or concerns, please let us know. We'd be happy to address those. And if you have any other questions, please let us know. And we thank you for attending this morning.
I want to thank everyone for coming today. Feel free to stick around, talk to Nick, Lauren, Les, Jerry, or Mickey, or any of our department heads. If you have any questions at all, don't hesitate to get with us, and we'll try to answer them to the best that we can.
Yeah, I have a comment
Oh,
before,
okay.
before we stop. You mentioned urban in nature. 835 acres of tillable ground is not urban in nature. That makes up 61% of the total land mass of 1360. Can somebody justify that to me? I don't drive through Carmel, I don't drive through Frankfurt right now and see tillable acres.
So let me try to answer that. I don't know the answer to satisfactory to me, but I will try to.
That's fine, I want to hear the explanation.
The goal of this annexation is one goal. It's to get to the point where the city limits are out to the interchange, so that as Frankfurt and the county partner together on the development of that interchange, we've already got the water and the sewer, but it's gonna take Frankfurt Fire as well, that Frankfurt can share in the benefits of that development that he is partnering to bring. Unfortunately, we have a requirement in the code that says in order to do that, we have to be out here, we have to be contiguous. I wish we didn't have to do this annexation to get there, but the Indiana code says we have to. And so we are crafting the ordinance to have as minimal effect as possible on everyone along the way. If it were not for the interchange, this annexation would not be happening. Like I said, I don't know that that's satisfactory, but that's the answer.
But let me add to that, the agricultural land is not going to be affected as long as it continues to be used for that purpose. The ultimate effect probably is going to substantially increase its value along State Road 28 there as development occurs.
And we have a difference in opinion on that. I think that it's going to stymie growth, but I mean, that's just my opinion, so.
I have one further question, I'm sorry. Any property owner who is currently connected to Frankfurt service such as water and or sewer, will they have a vote in the annexation? Basically, I'm talking about Jefferson.
Well, there is no vote in the annexation, but there is a remonstrance procedure that is available. As long as that owner is within that annexation territory, yes, they are entitled to remonstrate against the annexation.
They may have waived their right
How so?
when they connected to the sewer.
What were the circumstances surrounding that waiver, I wonder?
There's an Indiana code provision that required that waiver as a condition to the extension of the service,
And that waiver said,
that they could not remonstrate in future annexation.
okay, so then that statement's not correct.
Well, yeah, Nick is correct. I suppose there could be people who were connected that didn't sign a waiver, but to our knowledge, all that were connected.
I'm not sure that was made, it's optional to the people.
Was not. It's either hit the sewer or to condemn the house. That's how it was when we got the paperwork in Jefferson. You just need to sign the sewer and condemn your property. We're forced to do it.
Well, if a waiver has been signed and was recorded with the county recorder, there is no right to remonstrate. The waivers, to my knowledge, were all in the area of Jefferson and Newcastle Road. Any other questions anyone has we can address? Mayor Sheets, do you have anything else?
I do not. Did the utilities have anything or have anything on that? Okay. Department heads, anybody have anything they'd like to say? I encourage you to stay after, speak with us and give us your comments and your concerns, please. And thank you so much for coming today.
I've got Bill.